We are live. We are waiting for one Jeff Lenosky, who should be here any minute. In the meantime, welcome to the Shut Up and Ride podcast, where we, all you out there, interview mostly mountain bikers, free riders, and generally cool people. I kind of call the trail boss here. He's kind of the Tony Hawk of mountain biking. That's what a big deal this is. Check this out. Dude's got his own Wikipedia page. Among his high points, the world record bunny hop. We're going to actually have to ask him about that. How about this? Nickname, J-Lo. I just thought it was Jeff Lenosky. And then the other thing I want to show you here is, real quickly, there's Jeff's YouTube channel. It's almost at 50,000. Oh, here he is.
What's up, dude? I'm turning. Hang on, let me turn on my headphones so that we don't get an echo. Huh?
Turn on your headphones.
We're not live, are we? We're recording, correct?
Oh no, we're live. We're live.
Oh, really?
The world is here to see you. I have so many questions. Perfect.
Nice.
You good?
Yeah.
Hang on. I started without you about 30 seconds ago, but I have lots of questions.
99 seconds ago.
Something like that. I'm
going classy tonight. You saw the podcast last night. We polished off a bunch of these tonight. I'm going a little classier.
Clink. Me too. That was a great podcast last night. I saw it this morning. You guys went like 2.5 hours.
I didn't realize that we were going to talk so long. Jeez.
You demonetized the shit out of that. Or your friends did, at least. All right. I have a whole bunch of questions for you. Is it fair to call you the Tony Hawk of mountain biking?
Well, maybe not mountain biking, but maybe mountain bike free ride, or definitely street trials, or with something like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading your Wikipedia page. Does anyone still call you J-Lo?
No, that was something that the SRAM guys came up with years ago, and it fortunately never really stuck.
Well, fortunately, you're not turning 49 in a couple of days, so.
That is very fortunate.
Wow. Here, let me get us both on here. Let me ask you a couple of things. First thing is what kind of bikes do you have?
Right now, I have 5 bikes. I know that because I just did a little YouTube takeover or Instagram takeover the other day for the guys at Pearl Izumi. So right now, I have 5 bikes that I ride consistently. So the first one is a dirt jumper. It's a 26-inch steel single-speed dirt jumper that we make at Reeb. It's called a Destroyer. My second bike would be my trials bike, and it's a custom 27.5-inch trials bike. That's super fun to ride. And then I have a gravel bike that, you know, with all this quarantine stuff and everything, I've been riding that around quite a bit. And then the 2 that I ride the most would be my steel hardtail. It's a signature bike that I have from Reeb called the Ridiculous, and then the short travel squeeb. So 5 bikes.
So Reeb's not just your sponsor. I was watching your stuff last night. It was actually very interesting, and a lot of it was above my head. You really are involved with those guys. This is not like you got some sort of a sponsor. Here's an Ibis bike. Hopefully you show it on your channel and you show up in Sedona.
No, not at all.
You're very involved in their design process, and like half the stuff they were talking about last night, I was like, I don't know what that is. It was amazing. It was like 3 engineers talking.
Yeah, I mean, basically my career in 30 seconds would be I rode for Schwinn was well, I had a handful of sponsors like when I was in college and stuff like that, you know, different a frame sponsor, you know, short sponsor, whatever. Everybody was just like just product at that point when I was in college. And then my senior year of college, I won the national championship at trials. I had been going to college for sports marketing I always dreamt that I would be a professional mountain bike rider someday, and everybody would laugh at me when I told them, that was my dream. I just said it wasn't possible living in New Jersey, or, there wasn't really there was no sponsored trials riders back in the day other than Hans Ray, which was a European. So I graduated college. I kept working for 2 more years. I got a grassroots sponsorship on Schwinn, and it basically came down to Trek offered me a bicycle and a frame, and Schwinn offered me 2 bikes. And that was really, honestly, the only reason I went with Schwinn, because at the time Trek was really, really cool. But I didn't have the foresight, so I definitely stepped in a little bit of poop. I took it because it was two complete bike frames, but it happened to be Schwinn's 100th anniversary. So flash forward a few months, I was doing a demo at the bike shop that helped put this whole thing together. And there was a big event in New York City, the 5-borough bike tour going on. A bunch of guys from Schwinn came to the bike shop just to support it. And they saw me doing a demo, and I guess they thought I was pretty good. So they connected me with their PR agency, and the PR agency saw, that I could do demonstrations in a live studio, do an interview, whatever. So it was Schwinn's 100th anniversary. Mountain biking was really big. So those were the 2 big stories, Schwinn and mountain biking. This was in like 96. And then I had the ability to go into a TV studio and hop around on my bike and do some,
But you still do that now, right? I mean, how many demonstrations do you do a year?
Well, like right now, I should have been at the Sea Otter doing this public outreach program where we go around to about 16 or 17 schools for the 2 weeks leading up to Sea Otter Classic, and we'll visit like 7,000 kids. But that obviously got postponed to the fall. I don't do a ton of trials demos so much anymore. During the thick of it, when I was riding for Schwinn or my early years at Giant, I would do 100 venues a year, something ridiculous, like a touring band. But there were times where I'd get on the Vans Warped Tour or something like that, where you'd bang out like 30 days of shows in 30 days. Nowadays it's now I like to do a lot more interactive stuff. So I'd prefer to go to a mountain bike festival and like take a group out on the trail. And I still have like that trials demo spirit. So like whenever we come on a cool section, I always like to, show alternate lines or something like that. And, help people learn those skills on the trail, but, show off a little bit as well.
Tell me about Candid.
Yeah. So
tell me what Candid is, because I have Candid in the description below. And I've given a $1 or $2 to Candid because I always think that charities are a lot better. Or I don't know if you call it a charity. If it's a really direct, but it's a direct deal. It's not like United Way where they force you to do it at work and you find out the CEO's making $700K a year. Tell us about Candid.
So Candid is basically was the reason all this stuff really kind of came together. So I guess about 5 years ago, I had seen Oscar Blues was sponsoring Nate Hills and Nico Malali, a bunch of mountain bikers. And I was just having a casual conversation with somebody at Giant and just saying like, it would be a really cool sponsor, Oscar Blues, and I didn't think anything of it other than the time they were doing like branding on people's helmets and stuff like that. And the woman was like, oh, Dale's one of my really good friends. I'll send an email. Dale from Dale, like this Dale, the Dale that we had a bunch of these.
Tell people who Oscar Blues is. So not everyone knows that.
Oscar Blues is a brewery out of originally Colorado. Now they're in Colorado, North Carolina, and Texas. They were the first brewery to can craft beer. So Dale's was the first canned craft beer. So that's kind of what made them like one of the fastest growing, beer companies 10 years ago or whatever. They got off to a huge start, and now they're, pretty big brewery. So 5 years ago, I had a conversation with somebody. I was like, Oscar Blues would be an awesome sponsor. So she put me in touch with Dale. Dale wrote back. He was like, said he was a big fan and whatever, which I thought was, it's usually a good way to start off a relationship when you're trying to introduce yourself to somebody who actually knows who you are.
Absolutely.
Instead of having to explain. And he put me in touch with the marketing people at Oscar Blues, and they do a lot of events. So that was the angle I was coming at them with, doing trials, demos, doing mountain bike demos at their events and stuff like that. But they told me about Candid. And once they told me about Candid, then that's what made me really want to get involved with the organization. So Candid is a nonprofit organization that was started by Oscar Blues, I guess about 7 years ago. Yeah, it's about 7 years ago. So Oscar Blues was started in Lyons, Colorado by Dale. And about 7 years ago, Lyons, Colorado completely flooded out and the town was devastated. It's a mountain town, so you wouldn't expect a mountain town to flood out. But I guess they had a crazy snowfall and rains and the dams broke and Lyons flooded out. So Oscar Blues started Candid as a response to that. So they started canning water. That's where the canned comes from.
Oh, is that what it means?
Yep. So they're canning water, and then and Oscar Blues has always been known for canning the first beer, you know, so that they've always had the whole can thing, you know. And so they started canning water, and Dale was giving grants to people that lived in town to, you know, get back on their feet. So that was where Candid started 7 years ago. About 5 years ago, they started to get into more public outreach stuff. So trying to get more kids on bikes, you know, limit screen time. They do a lot of environmental stuff, you know, different river cleanups and things like that. So once I started hearing that they do a bunch of stuff for kids through my trials background and everything, I've always loved doing trial riding demonstrations, you know, for people. And a lot of times they're school assemblies or kids camps or whatever. So that kind of tugged at my heartstrings. So it seemed like the perfect combination to work with a company like Oscar Blues because, you know, I like beer, whatever.
In 2019, how many bikes do you think you gave away?
So we've given away 3,000 to date. So I don't know how many we gave away last year, but we've only been giving away for about 4 years, and it's really ramped up. So I would say 1,500 roughly last year.
That's astounding.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing. Like I got involved with Candid, and I was at their first bike donation, and their first bike donation, it's a great bunch of people. It's small. It's only about five girls that work there. And the first bike donation I went to, they literally were buying retail bikes to give away to kids. And we did the first bike donation. It was only maybe like 25 bikes because they're paying a lot of money for the bikes. They're paying a lot of money for the helmets. We were giving away bikes for Candid with, I think they were Huffy branded bikes. It just wasn't like a big cohesive program, you know? So I gotta
start somewhere.
Yeah. So I introduced them to some contacts I had in the industry, and we started making private labeled bikes for them 3 years ago. And this year we introduced a new frame design that's better for kids. They have Reeb branding on the bikes. So they have a Reeb head tube as we tied in Reeb. They have Trail Boss stickers on them. They have Candid logos. It's a special color. If you ever see my red hardtail that I ride around on either my trials bike or my hardtail, it's a red bike that matches the graphics on the bikes that we give to the kids. So when I go and do a demonstrations, they kind of are getting like a miniature version of what I'm riding.
I know this guy that just showed up right here. He knows you, Henry. He helped you build some of those bikes.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was going to mention that, like, I know that when you show up to a town and give a bazillion bikes away, one of the coolest things about it is that you end up getting the mountain bike community, like, bring a wrench, bring some sockets, and let's put this together. I know Henry's done that.
Yep, Henry was there in Texas, I think it was. It wasn't in Arizona. It wasn't his hometown. He was someplace for work, and he brought.
Henry gets around.
Yeah. So that was pretty sweet. So that's how this whole thing came together. I started working with Oscar Blues first, and once I started working with Oscar Blues, it was kind of immediately Candid. And then for the past several years, I was doing a lot of Candid stuff, but I couldn't do a ton because when I was riding for Giant, I was doing their big initiative was to do retail store grand openings. They just want to try to, the whole bike industry is trying to figure out how to get bikes to consumers, and Trek is basically buying all the bike shops and just owning them themselves. Giant's trying to get people to franchise it. Specialized has their strategies. But when I was riding for Giant, I was their main activation at all these events. So I was going to, I think the last year, like 27 retail store grand openings a year.
They're one of the top 3 manufacturers in the world, right?
They're the largest in the world. In the U.S., they're number 3. But in the world, and I mean, and they make everybody's bikes. Like if you buy a Trek that's not made in the U.S. is made by Giant. It's all the same thing. Like any Trek that's not made in the U.S. is made in the Giant factory.
I've heard that pretty much there's a 10 square mile spot in China that pretty much 90% of the bikes in the world are made from.
Yeah.
Now, so you're taking a big left turn going, Reeb, these guys, these hippies you were talking to last night that happen to be engineers.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So in 2018, I was, like I said, I did about 27 retail store grand openings. I've always enjoyed doing trials demos and stuff like that. But, you know, at this point in my career, when you go to these retail store grand openings, the problem with a lot of them, it's basically a turnkey solution for people who want to open bike shops. So I'm completely generalizing right now because all the giant bike shop owners were always super cool, but a lot of times they weren't necessarily like hardcore bikers. It might be somebody who like cashed out of the stock market, somebody who sold a business and just wanted to do a bike shop. Like it was just a turnkey solution. Like, hey, I like bikes, I want to open a bike shop. You open a giant bike shop. It's not like the guy who's lived in the community for 20 years and has this reputation as like being a big cyclist and like a lot of outreach and things like that. So when I would go to these grand openings, there was always very little, very low crowd turnout at all, because it wasn't like they weren't shops that had deep tentacles into the community or, you know, or whatever. So I started to notice that when I'd go to a mountain bike festival, I could easily have 50, 100 people over the weekend come to ride with me. And then you spend an entire weekend going to a retail store grand opening and you might have a dozen people standing in a parking lot watching you do tricks. And it's just not satisfying. Like I'd rather go out and engage with 50 or 100 people at a mountain bike festival like Sedona and go ride beautiful trails and give them some tips on the trails and show off a little bit and have a good time than go to a
I heard you're a huge show off.
Then go to
you
a
know
parking
who I am?
lot.
I hear you do this a lot. Do you know who this guy is? How did you get the nickname Trail Boss? Because that's you can't get better than that.
So man, we're all over the place with this interview. So that was probably 3 years ago. I started my whole career riding trials. The first 10 years, I just did competition trials. And then the next 10 years, that's like when the whole video boom started. So I was filming for all the big mountain bike movies. And it was so different than YouTube back then, because you would have the chops, earn a spot, and then you were in a video where there was maybe 10 riders from the entire world in these big videos, and you earn your spot. And that's what the bike shops watched for an entire year. There was no competition. There was no putting out videos every single week. There was no clickbait. Like you just earned your spot in the video and then you just did your best to hold on to it. So I was doing a lot of that. And then I guess it's almost about 10 years ago now, like YouTube started to get really big, and the DVDs and stuff, the big production videos kind of started to fall to the wayside. And it was taking me basically like an entire year to plan a video segment for these things. And it just got to the point where I filmed for my last big title, New World Disorder 8. And I felt like I did, you know, a good job and couldn't really see one-upping that again. I kind of landed like all these tricks I ever wanted to do, backflips on street and tail whips and all kinds of big wall rides. And it took me a whole year to plan it. And then I just, you know, started seeing like Danny McCaskill put out a video where you could spend 2 years filming and put it out. And I'm trying to do like 27 demos a year for Giant and plan a video segment. It was just like too much. And I didn't think I could like keep up.
Let me ask you about YouTube. Let me ask you a couple things about YouTube. The first thing is Prince is dying and dead.
Prince completely dead.
And YouTube comes along like idiots like me who get some subscribers here and there. And there's this controversy that a pro racer, like pick one.
Yeah, I've heard that story told a bunch of times. You know,
what do you think about that? What's your take on that? Where you have a pro racer, a UCI guy that's busted his ass, and all of a sudden, some idiot like me is getting sponsorships at my age and supposedly taking away from them. I mean, is that a thing?
it's definitely a thing. And I have gotten into trouble with other YouTubers and whatever, because, you know, I've been in this industry for 25 years. And when I first came into the whole YouTube thing, I came into it from the angle of like, you had to have the chops to get into a magazine, or you had to, you know, earn a spot in a video. So there was always like a gatekeeper of like who got to see what, you know, if you want to call it quality control or whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
No, that's a great word.
But the fact of the matter is, now that I've been doing it for as long as I have, I don't hold anything against anybody who's successful at YouTube, because I see how difficult it is, and I see that at the end of the day, you just have to be entertaining. And there's nothing wrong with somebody watching an average rider. You know, I obviously have a lot of pro rider friends, and they'll be like, "Man, that guy gets all those views and whatever." But the fact of the matter is that rider might not be the best rider, but they're super entertaining, and I'll watch a lot of those guys. So I almost feel like you have like personality or bike riding skills. Choose one. Like,
yeah.
It's all gonna equal 100. You might be the best bike rider in the world, and I know some of the, you know, I'm friends with a lot of the best bike riders in the world. And when you've traded in that currency your whole entire life, just your bike riding ability, you never had to be personable or whatever.
I would say, like, if it was about talent, like you and Eric Porter should have, if people knew, should have 1 million subscribers. And I think you will someday. I think it'll kind of wash itself out, but I think that's an honest answer. And I think it's honest for somebody to be resentful of any YouTuber. But on the other hand, I think people are still figuring it out. My friend Joe wants to know, when did you make your first million?
I don't know, maybe 10 years into my career. and that was for the first 10 years, not per year. So the problem that I have though with that question is, and I'll just give my honest answer. I have a problem with when you build a big YouTube audience and then you try to diversify, so to speak. So I as a person who's been in the industry for 23 years or 25 years, I have a problem when somebody does super entertaining stuff on YouTube and they're super fun to watch, and then all of a sudden they do a bike check. And then they have no idea what they're talking about with the bike. And then you see that video got 100,000 views, and then Bike Magazine, who like truly knows what they're talking about, gets 7,000. And then the problem is, then you have people saying like, well, it's, you know, they don't realize that YouTube works on algorithms. So when that person has, you know, 500,000 viewers, their video is going to get seen by more people, and it's going to rise to the top, no matter how truthful that information is or not. So that's when it kind of aggravates me a little bit. But if it's just like an entertaining video of somebody building something, or, you know, Porter just put out a video this morning, and I just saw it, like it's refurbing a shovel, and it's already at like 7,500 views in 8 hours. Like, it's ridiculous. So that's the only time that I have problems with YouTube, is like stuff like that. And the other thing is like the narrative of, you know, there's the urban legend about how like Phil Metz was at a downhill race, and I've heard like a bunch of YouTubers float this around. They'll say like Phil Metz was at a downhill race and nobody knew who the pro racers were, right? And then so then you get all the YouTubers saying this story, and then, you know, they all say like racers are useless, YouTube's the future. And then I'm good friends with Phil, so I call Phil and I'm like, oh, what race was that? And it was like a local race with like no big names. And I'm like, so that's not really a very accurate comparison.
Depiction, yeah.
Like Phil Metz is the Aaron Gwynn of YouTubing. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
Like Seth Bike Hacks is the Lance Armstrong of YouTube. Like, so it would be stupid to say like, oh, Seth was at a road race and nobody knew who the road racers were. Well, if Lance Armstrong was there, they would know who Lance Armstrong was. Like, so it's not an accurate comparison. So you'll get like, and then the other thing is, then I saw like, you know, there was another YouTube video earlier this year, and it's a pretty big channel, and the guy was given a analogy of how companies sponsor racers and YouTubers for the exact same reason. And I'm like, it's not for the exact same reason. Like if the bike industry only sponsored YouTubers, there would be no product development. There would be no, you have to race shit to have good stuff. Like a YouTuber is super entertaining and they'll reach more people than a lot of racers, but you still need those racers to develop the new Shimano XTR or a new tire or whatever. You know what I mean? So I've always looked at it differently because I got into it from trials and nobody gave a shit about trials when I first started. Like I've always had to try to convince people that what I'm doing is useful and figure out how to get my riding in front of people.
Who are the trials guys? Danny McCaskill and Allie Clarkson are the ones that come to mind on YouTube.
Yeah, that's it. Like Duncan Shaw does pretty well.
Yeah.
Now. My awesome friend Lance Trappy does amazing stuff, but I don't know why he just can't catch traction. But yeah,
that is a very, very strange thing about YouTube. I mean, it's just it's odd. Everyone kind of chases the algorithm, but nobody knows what the algorithm really is. And it unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be talent. It's like, if it was talent, it would be you, Kometz, McCaskill. I mean, I could just name them eventually, the 10 guys that go, those are the 10 guys. And then we would be having 8,000 subscribers. So I find that very interesting. But I would say, because I want to argue with you, is that what happens is if you have like, what's the magazine that just went under? Something, Dirt Rag.
Oh, Dirt Rag, yep.
Dirt Rag's done. So what I would say is this, is that Dirt Rag's sitting there and they're a paper magazine and you need to go digital. So let's say some bike company like Giant pays somebody to take a great photograph, pays a writer to take a great photograph, pays a marketing company to have a great photograph, gets it in there, and there's 10 different ads in that magazine. But what you're asking me as a Dirt Rag subscriber, maybe 40,000 people subscribe to that, you're asking me to go to a computer, look it up, and find it, as opposed to saying, hey, wait a minute. Here's my bike. Here's my video. And I only have like 7,300 people. But if you want to check out my bike, and that's why I wear a chainsaw, I never wear a hat of when somebody has a bike sponsor. But click on that, and not only will it take you to the manufacturer, but directly to the bike. And so things have happened so quickly. And I would imagine if I was Aaron Gwin, I would be fucking pissed off. Like, wait a minute.
I mean, I don't think those guys are, the guys that are competing in World Cup downhill or Rampage or Crankworks where there's a built-in media component, they don't really have anything to worry about. All those guys need to worry about doing is racing, and they're going to be on Red Bull TV, and they're going to get the airtime that the sponsors want. And again, I've seen lots of comparisons from YouTubers about like, comparing somebody's YouTube subscriber base to Fort William World Cup downhill and say like, oh, there's only 30,000 people there. This YouTuber is more valuable, but it's not true, because you and I know that Eric Porter just made a video. Like Eric is literally the most consummate professional that I've ever met. He always does an awesome job. He always represents his sponsors great. Like Eric is truly the cream of the crop as far as like being a professional bike rider, right? But he just got 7,500 views making a shovel video. Like that's not selling any bikes. Like it's just entertainment. So by the logic, somebody might compare it, like think that that's like selling bikes. So a lot of it is entertainment. And if Aaron Gwin goes to Fort William where there's 30,000 people that took the time to get in their car, drive hours, stay in a hotel, pay a ticket to watch, hike up and down the mountain, like when he comes by, people are going to buy those tires or they're going to buy that bike. Whereas if you're just sitting around, on the couch watching a YouTube video because it's entertaining, it's not the same thing.
No, I agree. It's interesting that you say that, because since we don't know the algorithm, but you or Eric Porter, or like you, I would buy Pearl Izumi. I've been in Pearl Izumi for a bazillion years. But even if Eric Porter only got 10,000 views, I would still be going, wait, that's Eric Porter or that's Jeff Lenosky, as opposed to watching someone getting 60,000 views and like, that ain't Jeff Lenosky. And
Yeah.
so
You know,
I think the algorithm, maybe it smooths out because of that.
You know, obviously, like those guys, the guys with the much bigger YouTube channels completely kill it on ad revenue. They have way bigger Patreons. I don't even like try to push Patreon, but I know for a fact that like when myself or Jeff Kendall Weed or Eric Porter or Nate Hills has a conversation with a bicycle company and we're looking for financial support, our conversations are completely different than other channels that are way bigger, but more bikertainment, you know, bike entertainment.
Is it is it an uncomfortable conversation where you're like, look, I don't mean to be an asshole. I wouldn't be. I don't mean to be an asshole, but I'm Jeff fucking Lenosky. I have chops, and they know that. Yeah. As opposed to if I had 50,000 subscribers, I can't show up and go, I need some free sunglasses. Do you know who this guy is?
Right. No, I think that a lot of the people in the bike industry recognize that, you know, you have a marketing funnel and those guys are going to reach much wider and we're going to reach much deeper. So my 50,000 subscribers are going to hold up to somebody who has 500,000, but it's just like, does my fat bike float? Can I build a ramp? Can I do that? You know, you just hope that your stuff is more aspirational. And when I go to a group ride, like people are going to see the same thing on the group ride as they see in the video. You're not going to get dropped on your own group ride. You're not going to, you know, you're not going to disappoint somebody who thinks that you're the craziest rider because you have a huge YouTube following. Like if I go on a group ride, they're going to see they're going to get what they get. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
Well, let me ask you this then.
That's why for me, my whole reason that I do YouTube is so that I could do those group rides. I've never found another platform that gets the engagement from YouTube that YouTube.
You've answered my question.
If I'm going to Sedona Fat Tire Festival and I put on my Facebook page, my Instagram page, and my YouTube channel, I'm going to Sedona Fat Tire Festival, and like the last festival I went to, I think over the 3 days, like 87 people showed up to ride with me or whatever. I'd say 60 of them are like, I follow you on YouTube. Instagram, wow. Like people just flip through Instagram mindlessly. Like you're not really making impressions on Instagram. Nobody's even on Facebook anymore. The YouTube is the true dedicated community. So that's why when I first started doing Trail Boss, and you asked how that name came about. When I first started doing Trail Boss, it's 3 years now. The very first year, the plan was to just make 6 Trail Boss videos a year, and you do them more for editorial. So I was doing them, and I was giving them to Pink Bike, I was giving them to MTBR, I was giving them to, you know, Dirt Rag at the time, and YouTube was just a place to host it, so I can aggregate numbers, so that I could just share everybody the link, because I didn't want to like post a video on Pink Bike and see how many videos it got, how many views it got, and then post it, whatever. Like I put it on YouTube just to do that. And around the same time, I started going to more mountain bike festivals, and I started to see like, this is an awesome community. And there's a lot of people that are like, they'll come out and support you, and it's a great way to build a fan base and interact and whatever. So then I started to realize like, I'm not getting traction just putting out a video every 2 months. I got to do more content. So that's when I started doing like more weekly content stuff about 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that. But my whole strategy, or the whole, I don't even call it a strategy, because I clearly don't have a YouTube strategy, because I think that I have worked in the industry for 23 years, and I went to college for sports management, and I always laugh and I tell everybody that I know what I should do to grow my channel. I just don't do it. Because every single time I'm putting together a bike, I'm like, F it. Like, I just want to put this bike together and ride it. I don't want to sit there and make a video of like glamour shots of me putting on a derailleur. Like, I just don't want to do it. And like when I build a ramp, I just build a ramp and I ride it.
Yeah,
like,
but
I'm not doing all that bullshit. And then I know that like my channel could be bigger, but I just don't care.
exactly.
Like, I don't care. Like maybe there's going to be a day that I care, but like I live and die by my own sword. Like I know that if I rode down the trail and said funny shit, like I'd get more views, but it's just not me. I have like more of a introvert personality. Like if I get on a one-on-one conversation, even though a lot of people watch this with you, like I could ramble on, but like I'm not the guy who's going to like hoot and holler down the trail. It's just not me. So it would be super inauthentic to do it. I know I'd have more followers, but like this is me. Like hopefully I get more followers and people like me, but it's like that's me. Like you get what you get.
No.
So anyway, back to your thing with Trail Boss though.
Yeah, finally.
So the whole way that came about was I was doing tons of mountain bike trials, demos, and earlier in my career, I just was a trials rider. So nobody expected me to go mountain biking. Like I just rode trials. But probably maybe about 8-9 years ago, I started racing a lot of enduro. I was doing mostly trials and street stuff. I broke my leg. As part of rehab, I got on a mountain bike and I started mountain biking more. Like I've always been a mountain biker, but I just would spend all my time riding trials or dirt jumping or street riding, whatever. Like when I first started, I raced pro downhill. I did trials, whatever. I just got out of it for a long time, mainly because of bandwidth and whatever. So I was basically doing street trials and trials, doing a lot of trials demos. I broke my leg. I wasn't ready to start doing trials or street again. So I just got on a mountain bike. So I needed to do like some photo shoots for Fox and whatever. So I just did like stuff on a regular mountain bike to just kind of, fake it till you can make it. And the bikes were really good. This was like 7 or 8 years ago. And you're like, well, shit, these bikes are way better than they used to be. This is actually kind of fun. Like I go for a trail ride and get in a little bit of downhill, get in a little bit of trials, whatever. It was pretty fun. But I'm always like the overcompensator guy. So then I was like, well, I can't just like shoot pictures for magazines riding a mountain bike, because then that's like, I don't know, you just look like the washed up dude. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do photo shoots for magazines, I need to at least race. I got to try to race.
Are we there yet? As far as evolution goes, one of the things that pisses me off, and I was one of those guys like 29, come on, man. Okay, that's fine. 27.5. All right, we're there. 27.5 plus. So I want your opinion. Are we there yet?
Hold on. I didn't finish my story.
All right, I'm sorry.
All right, so I was doing all kinds of trials demos, and I started racing enduro, and I got super hooked because I've always been like, I'm not afraid to try new shit, and I'm not afraid to suck. Like if I go downhill racing and I suck, I don't care. Like I know a lot of friends who like they don't ever want to suck in front of other people. If I suck at something, like I don't want to suck in front of everybody, but I don't mind sucking in front of a few people. So I loved racing enduro because you get to the point with like trials and street that like in order to learn a new street trick, it's like incremental improvements, or you try to bunny hop higher, like to go a millimeter higher, starts to get impossible. Like when you've reached that threshold, So then I throw a leg over an enduro bike, and 1 week a hill's hard to pedal up. The next week you can do it. The next week you go down that same hill 5 seconds faster. Then the next week you could shave 10 seconds, and it gets addicting because you could see that improvement that you saw when you first started those other sports, because you don't hit that plateau. So I was totally into it because you improve really fast and it's fun. It's something new and whatever. So I started racing more enduro, and people started knowing that I was racing enduro. So then when I go to do trials demos, it started to be very common. Like, oh, you mountain bike? We got this trail that you can't do. It's impossible. We've never seen anybody do it. And then I'd go to Indianapolis, and somebody would say, I'd go to Phoenix, somebody would say that. And that was actually, Indianapolis was the first place somebody said that. Brown County, Indiana, there's a trail there called Schooner's Trace. This woman came to one of my demos and she's like, we have this trail that nobody can clean. I wonder if you could do it. And I was like, in Indiana, I can't imagine that's really that hard. So a few months later, I went and I saw it, and I was like, holy shit, this is a really hard trail. And I was trying to come up with some kind of video content idea because the guys at Pink Bike were encouraging me. They're like, you should do a video series. People would love to see Lenosky, because I wasn't doing like the New World videos anymore and stuff. And I was like, if you shoot a street trials video or trials, like there's no story, there's no end, you don't know, should you try to film 2 more bar spins? Should you do an extra wall ride? Like, when do you stop? It's like a cat chasing its tail. So then I started to realize if I do a series where I just ride a really hard trail, like the trail is the trail, you have a start and a finish and you try to ride the trail, and that's like kind of entertaining. So that was the idea. I was just going to do 6 a year. And originally my idea was to name it Trail Tamers, which sounds so dumb now, but that was my idea. I pitched it to the guys at Giant and they were like, you should name it. I was like, I want to name it Trail Tamers. And one of the marketing guys who I'm friends with was like, you should name it Trail Boss. And I was like, kind of sounds douchey, first of all. And
well, you can get away with that.
And in BMX, there's guys in BMX like Robbie Morales has been Trail Boss, because if you ride dirt jumps, it's trail riding. So you're like, whoever builds the dirt jumps is always the Trail Boss. And Robbie Morales was like, he's a Trail Boss. He had a signature bike called the Trail Boss. Trail Boss was around forever. So I kind of thought like it was a little douchey and whatever. But then I started to think about it, and I wrote like a treatment or whatever. And I was like, the original pitch to Pink Bike and whatever was like, with the right information, anybody could be a trail boss, but if you mess up, Mother Nature will remind you who's really in charge. So the idea of the video series at first was like to preview a trail. Like one of the first ones I did was South Mountain, climbing climbing National Trail and doing a waterfall. And the intention was like, if you ever go to South Mountain and you're ever going to ride that trail, like this is the blueprint. Like this is, hopefully it's aspirational and it shows you how to do it. But when I first started making those videos, it was always like, we got to make it 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because I was thinking of it like as an edit, like it's got to be super quick. Nowadays, like you string along a YouTube video as long as possible. But that's where the name Trail Boss came from. Those guys encouraged me to do it, and at first I thought it was like I said, kind of like douchey a little bit, but then I thought like, well, I'm not trying to be the Trail Boss, although out of all things I've ever done in my career, like nothing sticks like Trail Boss. Like
who made the logo? The logo is awesome.
The guy who was editing my videos at first. Like when I first started doing, I wasn't editing them. I just like would film them and give it to my buddy, and he would edit them, because I was just doing 5 or 6 a year. So he came up with that logo. So yeah, that's the story behind how the Trail Boss.
I saw where you cleaned the whole enchilada.
Yeah, with Brian Lopes. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to ask you some of my questions here, Mister.
Okay.
Will you ever have an EMTB?
Hell yeah, I think that.
God, that's crazy.
I think that e-bikes are the future. I think that everything that the bike industry to this point has put them into a pigeonhole that's kind of the point of no return, and it's just the future. And I think that for companies right now, they don't get it. They think that they market it to people like us. And I think the future, unfortunately, is to market it to like 20-year-old kids, not 40, 50, 60-year-old guys.
Well, let's go to my next question then, because I have very strong opinions about this. I think mountain biking is marketed so bad, really terribly. The same with the ski industry. I don't understand it at all, because I look at trail forks and I look at who checks in and who doesn't check in, and generally young people check in. And what generally happens is most people, whether they want to admit it or not, they want to ride a blue trail. So right. 75-80% of people are riding blue trails on trail bikes, and so that's, I guess I answered my own question, but I want your answer. What's wrong with the mountain bike industry, if anything?
I don't think anything's necessarily wrong with it, but I think that it has brought us to the point of these e-bikes, because many things has happened, and these are all like super generalities. But for the most part, depending on where you live, obviously it's going to be a little bit different. But more likely than not, new style trail building is access road climbs or directional climbs with multiple finger downhills off of it, right? So if I think of getting an e-bike, or I tell any of my friends from New Jersey about an e-bike, they're like, that's the stupidest thing ever. And I used to think like an e-bike's so dumb. I don't want to go ride the trails I've ridden for 20 years in New Jersey on an e-bike. But when I go to Pisgah and you climb a fire road for an hour and 40 minutes to get a 5,000 foot descent on a super gnarly downhill, and it's just a one direction downhill, you're kind of an idiot to sit there and pedal your bike up there for an hour and 40 minutes and take one run in a day than getting on an e-bike and doing two, if that's the way you're going to build trails. You know what I mean? And a couple of days before that, I was at this guy's house in Georgia, and he has a huge private park on his property. Good elevation change. I showed up on my mountain bike, and all these 20-something guys were all on their EMTBs, and they're all like 20, 30, 40-foot jumps that if you're on a 30-pound mountain bike or a 35-pound e-bike, it's no different when you're hitting a jump that big. So if you're going to build a pocket park like that, I'm sitting there pedaling to the top of the hill thinking like I'm earning it and like it's this badge of honor to earn it. And these guys are literally doing 3 times as many laps as I am. So again, if you're going to build trails like that, it's just way more fun. Now, do I want to go ride my single track trails? Like, do I want to go do tech climbs? Do I want to ride up the waterfall on an e-bike? No, absolutely not. But I guarantee if somebody was to build new trails in South Mountain now, it would be one way up and then multiple fingers down, which totally lends itself to an e-bike. So trail building is one thing that's kind of funneling people to want to do that. And then as far as the bike industry, 15 years ago, I would ride around on a 120 millimeter super stiff like suspension bike, but it wasn't plush. It was steep and whatever. And you didn't have dropper posts or whatever. So you needed to wear lycra shorts because baggy shorts would just snag on everything. You couldn't drop your seat post. And hammering up a hill on a short travel bike isn't a problem. So a 36 tooth cassette in the back with 120 millimeters of travel bike is a efficient bike. You could just stand and hammer up a climb. It's no big deal. Now, like every single bike that's coming out is 140, 150, 160 millimeter travel bikes. They're heavier than ever. They're plusher than ever. Everybody wants to ride. This is like a riding shirt. People want to ride in flannels. They want to ride in t-shirts. They want to look like a skater. And then all of a sudden you're supposed to not, and then the bike industry starts figuring out how to put lockouts on shocks and 51 tooth cassettes so that you could pedal your 35-pound, 160 millimeter travel.
So you have a pizza sitting in the back of your bike.
Right. So just so you get this tank of a bike that's like awesome. Like it's designed to go downhill, and it's freaking awesome at going downhill, but it sucks to climb. So eventually somebody's like, well, how about instead of a shock lockout and a 51 tooth cassette, why don't you just put a motor on it? And you're like, shit, I guess that does make sense. Like if that's the kind of bike you want to ride and that's how you want to dress and that's the kind of trails you ride, like we've gotten to this point where like, it's just a point of no return. Like people might think I'm an idiot for saying it, but like, that's how it goes. Like the mountain bike industry is not pushing cross country. They're pushing free ride and gnarly trail riding and whatever. That's
which
like
I think is a mistake, because I think the biggest secret about e-bikes are the tires. I'm not willing to put a tire bigger than a 2.0. I had a 2.5 on my Reeb and a 2.4 in the back because they fit and they were awesome coming downhill. The purchase was great, but on an e-bike, 3.1, 3.2, and you get unbelievable purchase coming down. It's not just going up, it's coming down. And so people are like, well, it's not as nimble. And there's a lot of people that they'll die eventually. They're like black and white photographers. I'm a purist, you're a dick, like whatever. But
I'm not saying like I would never have an e-bike as my only bike, but would think about it too. Like think about it in terms of like the way public bike parks are popping up. Like if people were riding e-bikes, you could have mountain bike terrain parks everywhere and you don't need a chairlift.
True.
Like
Spider Mountain. You could ride up Spider Mountain in Texas with an e-bike easy.
Yeah, Highland Mountain Bike Park in New Hampshire opens on Wednesdays for Wednesday enduro or whatever. You could it's maybe $5 to pedal up instead of running the lift. And my friend Aaron Chase rides his e-bike there, and he'll do like 20 laps, and everybody else is doing like 3. And it's like,
wow.
Are you really gonna fault him for having more fun than you? Like,
no. It's like a ski lift. Are you going to ride the lift in a ski lift? Dylan Larson here wants to know, what do you guys, I'm going to defer to you. What do you say is the best starter bike?
I would say like if you're actually going to get into like real mountain biking, probably the best bike, you know, and if you're on a budget, I think that you should just definitely start with a hardtail. Rear suspension bikes just complicate things and it costs a lot of money. So you got to save money somewhere. So if you build a suspension bike, you're going to downgrade components. Like say you have $2,000 to spend, you're always going to get a way better hardtail for $2,000 than a suspension bike because you need to downgrade front forks and drivetrains or whatever. So if you think that you're going to get into mountain biking and probably beat up your bike a little bit, you're better off going with the simpler one with better quality components than suspension that's not really designed to work great anyway. So I would say that. And then also, you know, there's a lot of awesome used bikes out there nowadays. So somebody might get into mountain biking and just want to try new bikes all the time. You know, you could save half off retail just by going to something like Pro's Closet, or, you know, if you want to do a little research on Pink Bike, but that could be challenging sometimes. So I'd say go used and go hardtail.
Let me ask you this. Here's my friend, Dr. Ramos, who, God bless him, is kicking the shit out of COVID right now for us all on the front lines. What got you into donating bikes for children? I mean,
it was a Candid thing. Like I've always enjoyed doing stuff for kids, but Candid was the first time where like you're able to like actually help get underprivileged kids into the sport that's basically given me the life that I have, you know. When I got my first bike, I was lucky enough that my parents just bought me a bike, you know. But a lot of these kids aren't in the position to have their parents buy them a bike, or they're grown-ups or whatever their living situation is. They're not in the position to just get a bike. So it's pretty awesome to like be able to go in and give that opportunity to kids. And it was something that Candid was starting right when I got involved. So it wasn't necessarily my idea at all, but I helped streamline it.
The Mostly Mike show. Jeff, any news about the investigation on the stuff that was stolen from you in California?
Nothing, which is crazy because it's not like it was a commodity specialized stump jumper or something. You know, it was like two one-of-a-kind bikes they think would turn up somewhere. But I got one phone call. They got stolen in April. I got one phone call in about September that somebody saw my trials bike, the hardtail, riding around on the street about a mile from where it was stolen. So obviously they didn't give a shit. Like they weren't sweating it. They were just cruising around, and then he never saw it again. But other than that, no word, no nothing.
Here's a tough question. Cake or pie?
What's that?
Here's a tough question. Cake or
Cake?
pie?
Cake or pie? Probably cake. Anything chocolate. More chocolate, the better.
You're the worst.
You don't like chocolate?
I love chocolate.
Oh, okay.
But given the choice of cake or pie, I take pie.
Really?
Huh. Yeah. All right.
Obviously never had a molten chocolate cake. No.
You should have seen me last year when I weighed 235. Here's a tough question. Tell me something that you think is true that almost nobody agrees with you on.
My bike riding friends, anybody who spent a lot of time with me will get a kick out of this one. That Counting Crows is the best band of all time.
Wow.
I believe that in my heart to be true. But nobody agrees with me because I hang around with bike riders and they don't listen to that.
All right. In the meantime,
I'm very emo.
Okay. At 49 years old here on April 19th. So
not
happy
yet.
birthday.
Not yet. Maybe when this airs, but not yet.
I'm so much older than you. I don't care. My shirt is older than you. So let me mention this, which I should have been saying a lot more, is all of Jeff's information is in the description of this video. So well worth the subscription. There are only maybe a handful of YouTube riders that actually, like Jeff says, it's a perfect word, that have the chops and have the history to do this. So do that. Find out his Patreon. Patreon is well worth it for him. All right. I got 3 last questions for you. I know I've kept you way too long. Jeff, how tall are you? According to Wikipedia, you're 6'4".
6'4", 220.
220. Wow.
Yeah.
You need to eat some vegetables, dude.
I know.
What's your favorite word?
What is my favorite word? I don't know. I always see myself, maybe because I type it and I like am conscious of it, but I feel like I'm always saying stoked.
Stoked.
Like
Do you
I'm
say
so
insane
stoked.
and send it and all that other mountain bike
No,
bullshit?
no, but I do say stoked a lot.
Stoked. I'm too old to say stoked. I'm out of the deal. What's your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word? Probably the F word.
Fair enough. And last question. And like I said, don't forget, this is so well worth the, not just the subscription, but I'm going to go to Sedona just to actually meet Jeff in person next year and go on one of his big group rides. I've never heard a bad thing about it. Henry has told me it's the awesomest. Our friend Ken has told us that as well. So figure out what Jeff Lenosky is all about, Trail Boss is all about. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Would I like to attempt other than my own? That's a good question. I like building things. I can't weld. That's like my one life regret is I can't weld. But other than that, like woodworking, all that stuff, I really like doing that. Like if money was no object and you didn't have to, you could make a good living just being carpenter, building stuff, whatever, I'd probably like to do something like that. And then, if it's more along in my wheelhouse, I went to college for sports marketing. So just maybe it's general marketing,
How long do you see yourself doing this on a bike? Rest of your life?
I mean, that was one of the reasons. Oh yeah. I mean, I can't imagine I wouldn't always ride in some capacity or whatever, but that was one of the reasons why I made the switch that I made 2 years ago to switch to a company like Reeb. I was working with Giant for 17 years and I thought that, that would last forever and that I would just start working for them someday. And then you start to realize like, I don't really want to move to California to work there. Bike industry doesn't really historically pay very well. Not that like that's my main motivating factor, but to live in California and work in the bike industry is a really tough proposition because
so
it's
like
really
being
expensive.
a bike rep going from place to place and
no, like marketing or something like that.
Okay.
I always like more creative kind of stuff. So I started to see like that wasn't really an option. And then, like I said, with going to all those retail grand openings and stuff, I realized I was spending all of my time building other people's brands, not my own. And we just started to come to an impasse. And then at the end of 2018, like just one day you come to the realization that like, this isn't working anymore and we need to go in different directions. So then my first thing was to talk to all the big bike brands. I started talking to, if you think of a big bike brand that would compete with Giant, like that's who I was talking to. And it actually was very, very, very important for me because when I was riding for Giant, they never did any marketing for me. I pretty much like would go to a lot of their grand openings and stuff like that, but it wasn't like they were blowing me up. They weren't running ads. They weren't doing stuff like that. So it wasn't like, I don't really think that I got there's some riders that you can argue like a bike company made their career. And I don't think like, I think I did whatever I've gotten to this point, I kind of got on my own, not because of who I rode for or whatever. But anyway,
I know I have you a long time. Let me ask you a question. I was really curious about watching you last night with the Reeb guys.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going into.
I've had a Reeb bike, and the first thing I looked at was like the welds, and it's just like, holy Jesus, this is artistic. The other thing that I realized about Reeb was I couldn't believe how fast it happened. I just called them up. I said, I want a Ridiculous 2. I want it flat black. I think I want these Reeb stickers. I ended up with a Reeb that literally people looked at like, I've never seen that bike.
Right.
I've heard of that bike. and I couldn't believe how quickly they got it out. Do you worry about the future of small mountain bike companies like Reeb when there are companies like Giant out there in Santa Cruz and all the monsters out there who say one thing and then do another thing? Like Santa Cruz a couple of years ago said we'll never fucking have an e-bike, and now they have a $9,000 heckler. So do you worry about the smaller?
And they've also said that in 5 years, half of their bikes will have motors.
I believe it.
Like, I know that,
who knows?
that conversation has happened to their reps and stuff like that. Yeah. So I knew I was leaving Giant. I figured I need to ride for another brand that big. You know, some of them were consumer direct brands. Some were like literally direct competitors with Giant, but I was doing like what I thought I needed to do. And that was like October, November. And I just wasn't psyched. Like it was really important for me because when I was riding for Giant, I wasn't like, they weren't blowing smoke up my ass. Like, so I was kind of like, you know, I'm 47 years old, just going to dealer grand openings and like nobody even comes. And you take it as a reflection of yourself a little bit, you know, because, and then you start to realize it's not me. It's the fact that if I went to a mountain bike festival, everybody will come to a mountain bike festival and they all want to ride and have fun, but you don't want to go stand around in a parking lot. Like, it's just not the way people want to spend their time anymore. So it's not like, and you have YouTube, you know, I used to do mountain bike trials demos because if you wanted somebody to see you ride, you had to go do it live, you know? So that's like the background that I come from. Like, you can make a YouTube video and do something 100 times and you put it in a video and everybody thinks you're awesome. But like for 20 years, like you did it live. Like you went in a parking lot and there's no safety net. If you suck, you suck. So you had to like perform at a high level.
You had to be on all the time.
Right. So, but then like nowadays with YouTube, like somebody could go on a YouTube video and see me do 10 times better stuff than they could see me do in a parking lot, because a parking lot, like you're limited to like what you could haul there and do a demo, you know? So it was just like, I wasn't in like the best mental state. Like when I was done with them, I wasn't feeling like I kind of questioned my value in the industry a little bit. And I thought, well, shit, maybe this is it. Like maybe nobody's going to be interested. And I started calling around and, you know, a lot of the big companies were very interested. A lot of the small companies were interested, whether or not they have money, whatever. But it was just good for my self-esteem or whatever, because it wasn't super high when that happened. So you're like, okay, like maybe the bike industry still wants me around a little bit, but I still wasn't super psyched on any of those opportunities. And then I made a video announcing that I was leaving Giant. And one of the girls from Candid said, "Farewell, Giant. Hello, Reeb." And I knew the Reeb guys because Reeb was started by Oscar Blues. So they'd always be around the same circles. And they're awesome guys, but they're super small. You know, we make 150, 200 bikes a year. That's it, you know?
Is that it, really?
Right. Versus a Giant where it's like tens of millions. So I was like, yeah, I mean, that would be awesome, but I just really don't see how that could ever work. And I ended up getting on a phone call with Dale from Oscar Blues, and he wants to try to grow the brand a little bit. And I realized, like, I don't have to just be an athlete. I can help you with marketing and some sales and bring a lot of contacts and stuff like that to the table. And we decided to give it a shot. And it's been the best career move I've ever made. You know,
I'll bet you sold more Reeb bikes than you sold Giant bikes. I mean,
well,
I don't think
part.
anyone would know about Reeb if it wasn't for you. And that's nothing against the guys at Reeb. I mean,
no, it was a perfect situation. Like, Reeb had a super squeaky clean image. When I started riding for him, was one of two things. I've never heard of them, which if you're a sponsored athlete, that's great, because now they have, and it was because of you. Or those guys make cool stuff. But it was never like they made garbage, or you're not trying to, like, I was talking to some bike brands that were like being super generous with offers, but they weren't necessarily like what I would consider cool or good. And you're like, well, maybe I can make it cool. And then you're like, you're not, though, because they've been around for 20 years and they've never been cool. Like, you're not going to make it cool, you know? So yeah. Some things are the way they are. So the Reeb thing came about, and it seemed like an awesome opportunity, because then after 20 years in the bike industry, like, Giant Giant came up with the name Trail Boss, so I can't like slight them for that. But then after I wasn't even riding them for them anymore, they used Trail Boss to market a bike that I never touched, tried, sat on, looked at, had any say or anything for like the first year. I wasn't, yeah. And then like all the reps would always like send me ball busting messages like about them marketing the Trance as Trail Boss, and it's like I never saw that bike, never rode that bike, never did anything. And with Reeb, I got the first Ridiculous when I started riding for him, or the Ridiculous that you rode. Yeah. And I was like, this bike's sweet. Could we do one that's like extremely more standover, slacker head angle? They're like, sure. They sent it over. Could we sell this bike? You know, I started getting a lot of comments like, that bike's cool. Are you going to sell it? Whatever. And now it's like a bike that's in production and we're selling a lot of them. And then the new Squeeb, like I totally helped Adam develop that bike. You know, I never did that with
you guys got into the weeds last night.
We got into the weeds big time, but it's a super good group of guys. It's always a struggle, but I feel like we are making progress. We sold a lot more bikes last year than we did the year before. If all this Corona shit clears up, we should do good this year. But I remember you brought up Reeb in one of your podcasts. I think it was with I can't remember. I think it wasn't Josh from Daily MTB. I forget who you're talking to, but you said you were saying like, what do you think is a better business strategy? Like a brand like a direct to consumer where you sell like 5 bikes for a certain margin, or Reeb, and you kind of insinuated like you just cash in this huge margin all on one bike. And I was watching it thinking like, I wish that we were that smart. But the reality is like a company like Giant, if they're building a carbon fiber suspension bike, they could easily order that bike from Taiwan at the bulk that they're ordering it, easily $500 for a frame that you're spending $3,500 to buy as a consumer.
Agreed. The local bike store that I go to, the guy does do that, and you might have heard of this brand. He's done it in road bikes and he's doing it in mountain bikes now. It's called Fetish. And he basically orders the bike and he orders the graphics, and there you go. There's a bike. And
then that's another misconception. Like people will look at that bike that he's selling and say that that's like a cheap China bike or whatever, but it's not. That's the same factory. I promise you that like any Trek Giant Yeti is coming out of. It's just that it's just called an open mold. So it's either a bike that they made that the patents or design have expired, and then now they could sell, or they might make one open mold bike that they could sell, but it's not a piece of junk. Like it's actually a pretty good bike.
I know.
People don't realize like, you know, a big bike company is going to spend $500-600 on that carbon bike. They bring it in, they got to make their margins. So now it's up to like, you know, $1,200 to $1,500. They sell it to a shop, or they put say $400 or $500 marketing into each bike. That's how you can go on Pink Bike, and you know, you see a banner ad on Pink Bike, somebody's paying $30,000-40,000 for that. That's all going into the cost of your bike. And then the bike shop needs to mark it up. So where we at Reeb suck as businessmen is if we're selling a Squeeb for $2,900, like we're only making a couple $100 on that bike, because you know we're not doing high volume at all. So that's why when I saw your thing, like when you're like, should you sell 5 bikes and make a little bit off each, or should you just sell one and make it all? And it's like, we're not making a lot on those bikes at all.
I know.
It is a labor of love.
And I've had you here way too long, but I was thinking about you today. I was thinking about like basically grad school economics, and they talk about Adam Smith, you know, back in the colonial days, where his example was making pins, and the pin maker would cut wire. The pin maker would polish the wire. He'd sharpen the wire. He'd put a head on it, and he'd have a pin, as opposed to getting 4 guys who are experts at each thing. And anyway, that's here, not here nor there. I'm going to cut you loose because I've had you here way too long. But
no, it's a fun conversation. I don't mind it at all.
Oh,
and Rafi is asking there about a Reeb demo in the New York area. We have a really good dealer called Tenafly Bicycle Workshop. Tenafly Bicycle Workshop. Or just send me a direct message on Instagram or whatever. but we have a dealer with demo bikes in the New York area.
Yeah, and well, let me ask you a really pie in the sky question.
Yeah.
What would happen if you owned Reeb and somebody like Giant, who's you're on their radar a little bit. I know they're massive. And one of the things that really struck me in the last few months, I didn't know this until I read an outside article, is that carbon is filthy. Carbon is a filthy, filthy, gross, bad for the environment manufacturing process because it's all made in China. You end up with a frame, but you probably use 10 times as much as you actually got the frame, and that frame goes to the bottom of the ocean, as opposed to the ridiculous two that I had that will be recycled. So, but what would happen if Giant said, "Hey guys, tell you what, we'll give you $1 million a piece for Reeb"?
Whew, that would be a pretty good offer. The problem with carbon is when I'm not going to sit here and like talk about carbon like it's the worst material ever. It's a great material. But the problem is that everybody in the bike industry is marketed to think that like it's the only material, and carbon's great. Like I've ridden a lot of carbon bikes for years and I had awesome success. But then I also had my last year at Giant where like I had 100% failure rate on 5 bikes. Every single one broke. So it's not to say but then I rode for 4 years on different frames and never broke one. So it just depends. But there's some places like, carbon frames are great, but if you drop it or ding it, you're gonna crack the surface, and a lot of times you can't see that damage.
Sure.
And you'll be like I was at Sedona Bike Festival 2 years ago, and the bike literally just exploded on a big group ride. So that was a little embarrassing. But am I going to say that, the reality is at Reeb, you heard it last night, like we're a small company. We couldn't afford to buy carbon molds right now if we wanted to anyway.
I don't think carbon's the next thing anyway.
Yeah. And then, people that do it, like Gorilla Gravity does it in the US, but I would argue that that's not really any better than an aluminum bike. I mean, I commend them for the effort for doing a carbon bike, but you have one frame for 6 different bikes, and you have to use adjustable headset cups that, from what I've heard, always end up creaking and moving and whatever. Like, it's almost like if you want to start a shoe company and you couldn't afford to make different sizes, I tell you to stuff the toes of your shoes to make them fit,
Yeah. But I've been looking a lot at aluminum manufacturing techniques. And I think in the next 5 years, aluminum is going to come back in a massive way because it won't be a really difficult weld. But that's just me. I think aluminum is going to be monstrous, and people will go back to aluminum.
It's making a huge comeback right now.
It's the most plentiful metal on the planet
as a value prop. Because if you're a bike manufacturer, one of the biggest things is you want to make a carbon fiber mountain bike frame. You need to make at least three molds: small, medium, large, probably extra large. So you got 4 molds. Each of those molds are going to cost tens of thousands of dollars, and each bike takes a certain time, a cycle time to build a frame. So you can only pump out so many bikes with that mold, with each mold, right? So the only way to make more bikes is make more molds, and every time you make more molds, it's a tens of $1,000 investment, So you have to make sure that your volume is going to amortize the cost of that mold. So every single frame you make is chipping away at that $10,000 investment. The materials, the carbon materials that go into it are super cheap, but that's why you're still going to like get at that, like if you're ordering it from Taiwan, that $600-700 threshold, like you just can't go that much cheaper, because if you want to make more, you got to buy another mold and you got to amortize it. But these companies could go to China and make aluminum bikes because all you need is an extra welding machine. There's no molds involved, whatever. It's a welding machine that's $5,000, whatever. And so you could pump out an unlimited amount of aluminum bikes over there because you don't have the investment for the molds to make these bikes. So aluminum bikes are always going to be super inexpensive over there, and that's something that we gotta battle against a little bit, because you can go get a super base level IBIS, probably for the cost of, or a few bucks less than the cost of our full suspension bike. But the craftsmanship on that thing isn't going to be as good 5 years down the road. Are those bearings going to hold up? Are the way we machine our seat cluster, everything's super precision. It's just a completely different product. And like, as bike riders, it seems super obvious to me, but to the casual enthusiast, like I remember looking at pool furniture or patio furniture years ago, and like I went to an actual patio furniture store, and I was like, what kind of idiot would pay $5,000 for patio furniture? I'm going to go to Home Depot and buy the whole set for $1,000. But then it falls apart in a year. And if you were if you were a patio furniture aficionado, you would know the difference, and you would be like, I would never buy that. I want the quality one. And with bikes, sometimes like maybe somebody like yourself or me can look at a Reeb and see the hardware, see the precision, see that, and really appreciate that. But the guy who's like just getting into mountain biking, they'll just buy the complete bike. And that's fine, because maybe down the road they will buy a Reeb, and we really are a custom manufacturer. We offer stock bikes, but you can get anything custom that you want. So you're not going to walk into an IBIS dealer and say, I want it purple with a yellow rear end and this color head badge, and can you drop this top tube a half an inch? Like, so.
Well, here's a question right on the screen, and I can answer that one. After following Jeff, now I've got my eyes on a Reeb, but no dealers in Australia. I can tell you this: I literally called them, and it was I didn't make a personal relationship, but he's like, "So what do you think you want?" I'm like, "Well, a large Ridiculous too," and the one they have on the website's like a bright green. I'm like, "Can you guys make it black?" And they did. Can you put these stickers on it? But I don't. And then I think I said, like, but I don't want this on it. And then that head tube badge, that is worth the price of the bike. So I'd say call them. And I could not get over the customer service. And I don't even know if I was going to call it that. It was like, I don't know the guy, but it was like calling a friend who's really fucking good at making mountain bikes. And he made it for me, and I couldn't get over how quickly it was built. And by the way, he's like, "Hey, he called me back. This is where we're at. It's drying right now. It's in paint." And I would just call him up, go to the website, and decide what you want. You're not going to make a bad pick. So I was unbelievably impressed.
We're so small that when people want bikes, a lot of times I help them out. So you could send me a message on Instagram or whatever kind of social media. I even have a Reeb email address. You can send it to Jeff@reebcycles.com, and I can help you out.
Cool. Wanted to cut you loose. Don't leave yet.
All right.
I'm going to stop the broadcast, but let me end it this way. Thank you for everyone and your thoughtful questions. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. And don't forget, just shut up and ride.